The morning I found out my son got married without me, I was folding towels. Blue ones. The kind I bought on sale 3 years ago when he came home from college and said he didn't like how scratchy the old ones felt. They were still soft. I remember that, because I remember everything about that morning. The light in the kitchen, the quiet hum of the dryer, and the exact moment my phone lit up with a message from my sister. Saw the photos. He looked handsome. Hope you're okay. I didn't understand. Photos? I opened social media, already half numb. There it was. My son, in a gray suit I'd never seen, smiling under a string of garden lights, holding the hand of a young woman I'd only met once. They were surrounded by friends, arms raised, laughter frozen in time. And me? I was folding towels. There was no invitation, no call, no warning. I didn't even know the date had been set. I stared at the screen for a long time, not crying, not yet, just adjusting, like someone blinking into a new light after too long in the dark. I thought, maybe this isn't real. But it was. The comments confirmed it. Beautiful bride. What a perfect evening. So glad we could be there. So glad. I put my phone face down and stood there, surrounded by silence and fabric and the sudden weight of what had just become true. I wasn't invited to my son's wedding, and, in a way I didn't yet want to say out loud, I understood why. It wasn't sudden. It had been coming, quietly, like a slow leak behind a wall. The missed calls, the conversations that ended too quickly, the way his stories had less detail every time we spoke. He'd been creating distance for years. I just hadn't realized how far he'd gone. Or maybe I had. Maybe I'd chosen not to look. The guilt came next. That tidal wave. What had I done? What hadn't I done? Was it the way I'd criticized his choices when he was younger? The fights we'd had about his grades, his friends. That one semester, he came home with eyes red from too much smoking and too little sleep. Was it the silence that followed our last argument? The one where I said too much and he said nothing? I sat down on the laundry bench, the warmth of the fresh towels pressing against my side. I thought about the first time I held him. He was purple and loud and perfect. They placed him on my chest, and I thought, I'll never lose you. And then I did. Not all at once, not with a bang, but like this, quietly, slowly, in layers. I pulled out a wedding photo on my phone again, zoomed in. His smile looked real. That hurt most of all. He looked happy, not burdened, not haunted. Just a man in love, celebrating. And I wasn't part of it. I thought about calling him, demanding an explanation, screaming even. But something in me paused. If he hadn't wanted me there, if he'd made peace with that choice, then maybe my silence now was the most honest response. I texted my sister back. Thanks for letting me know. He did look handsome. She replied instantly. I'm so sorry. I don't understand. But I did. Or at least, I would. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch. I opened the photo again, not to hurt myself, but to study it, to really look, and I realized something I hadn't seen the first time. The look on his face, it wasn't just happiness, it was freedom. And somehow, that broke me more than the absence of an invitation. The next morning, I went looking for the boxes. Not just any boxes, the ones in the back of the closet where I'd kept the scraps of motherhood that felt too important to throw away and too painful to look at. I hadn't opened them in years. Inside the first one, a baby bracelet with his name engraved in tiny letters. A Polaroid of the two of us. Me, younger than Grace is now, holding him like the world might end if I blinked. And then, a card. From when he was 10. Mom, I love you more than Legos and chocolate milk combined. Love, Josh. I sat on the floor and cried. Not loud, not even with tears at first. Just that kind of ache that settles in the bones, slow, deep, and ancient. I stayed there for hours, not because I was trapped in the past, but because I needed to remember who we had once been. He wasn't always distant. There was a time he'd crawl into bed beside me during thunderstorms and ask if I thought dinosaurs ever got scared of lightning. There were Halloween costumes I sewed by hand: a pirate, a space ranger, a terribly ambitious jellyfish. I loved him, fiercely, and I thought, completely. But loving is not the same as understanding, and parenting, I learned too late, is often more about restraint than correction. Josh was sensitive. He hated loud noises, always needed time to process things. When he got overwhelmed, he'd shut down, not out of defiance, but self-preservation. But I didn't always see that. What I saw was a boy who needed toughening up, a son who had to learn the world wouldn't always be gentle. And in trying to prepare him, I think I broke something. I remember a night when he was 13. He had forgotten to do a school project, one I had reminded him about 3 times. He panicked, started crying, said he was stupid, and I snapped. I said, then maybe next time you'll actually listen. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I hadn't, but I had hurt him. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. I apologized. I always did. But something changed after that. A small, quiet wall went up, not made of anger, but of self-defense. And it only grew with time. I tried to be better. I read books, went to a parenting group, tried gentle communication, but it always felt like I was trying to erase damage I hadn't wanted to admit I caused. By the time he was in college, we were polite. Phone calls were scheduled. Conversations were careful. He told me about classes, but never about heartbreak. Told me about projects, but never about dreams. Then he met her. I remember the first time he brought her home. Sophia. She had bright eyes and a soft voice. At dinner, she offered to help with dishes. I said no, politely, but she insisted. And when I handed her a plate to dry, I noticed the way she glanced at Josh. It wasn't fear. It was something else, like she was checking for his approval before she moved. Later that night, I asked him how things were going between them. He said, good. Just that. No elaboration. So I tried. She seemed sweet. She is. Does she make you happy? She makes me feel safe. I remember pausing then, because that wasn't the word I expected. Not loved, not excited, not understood. Safe. And now, I wonder if what he really meant was safer than I felt growing up. That was the last time he brought her over. Not because anything went wrong, but because nothing went right. We didn't fight. We didn't disagree. But I saw it in his eyes, the effort it took to be here, with me. And now, I think back to that night as the moment he decided, my wedding doesn't need this weight. I wasn't uninvited. I was left out of a world that no longer included the parts of me he couldn't carry anymore. And if I'm honest, painfully honest, I understand that choice. That doesn't make it less cruel, but it does make it clearer. That night, I did something strange. I opened a new document on my computer and titled it, Letters He'll Never Read. I wrote, Dear Josh, I saw the wedding photos. You looked at peace. And while a part of me shattered, another part, deeper, older, finally saw the truth. I wasn't always the mother you needed, but I never stopped loving the boy who made me one. A few days after starting the document, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly 2 years, my ex-husband. I stared at his name on the screen for several rings, unsure whether to answer. Then I did. Hi, I said flat. Hi, he replied. I heard. That was all he needed to say. We were quiet for a moment. Two people who had shared a son, a life, and 1,000 unspoken regrets. I didn't know either, he finally added. About the wedding. I believed him. He would have told me, not out of loyalty, but out of obligation. We had always been like that. He looked good, I said. He did. Another pause. You okay? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Then, I'm learning to be. He sighed. There was so much we never got right. And in that silence between us, I remembered the years when we tried to fix each other by fixing our son. Josh was 10 when we divorced. I got custody. He got the spare weekends and the holiday debates. Josh floated between us like a letter never delivered, always being translated through someone else's voice. I remember one summer, after a particularly bitter fight over schooling, Josh refused to pack his bag for the weekend. He sat on his bed, legs crossed, and said, Why do I always have to be the one who moves? And I didn't have an answer, because he was right. He was always the one adjusting, always the one carrying the tension like a second backpack. Back on the phone, my ex cleared his throat. I've been thinking about him a lot lately. Me too. Do you think we made him feel like choosing either of us meant betraying the other? I swallowed. Yes. There it was. The simplest truth, and the hardest. He was quiet again, and then he said, I want to reach out, just to say congrats. I nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. Do it. He deserves to hear it. And you? All right, I said, but not to send. He understood. That was the thing about us. We always understood too late. After we hung up, I sat by the window with a pen in hand and stared outside. The trees were beginning to turn, leaves falling like softened edges. I opened the document again, letters he'll never read, and I added, Dear Josh, your father called me. We didn't talk about the past, not really, but in the space between our words, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The shared ache of having loved you in ways that didn't always look like love. That night, I dreamt of Josh as a boy, running barefoot through the backyard, a cape tied around his shoulders, yelling something about saving the world. I woke up with tears on my pillow, not from sadness, but from remembering that once he let me be the safe place he ran to. The next day, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside, a book, hardcover, first edition, one of his favorites from high school, The Giver. Tucked inside was a note, handwritten. Some stories stay with you. Thought you might want this back. Jay. I stared at the letter for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an invitation. But it was something. Something that said, I remember too. I placed the book on the shelf beside the photo albums. Not hidden, not displayed, just home. That evening, I sat with a cup of tea and reread the note. And I did something I hadn't done since the day I saw the wedding photos. I smiled, because the wound was still open, but now it was breathing. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of the attic door. I hadn't been up there in years. It wasn't just the dust or the boxes. It was what they held, all the things I hadn't known how to let go of. I climbed the narrow stairs slowly, each step creaking under a weight heavier than just me. There was a trunk in the far corner, the one with Josh's childhood drawings, the crumpled finger paintings, a certificate from a second-grade spelling bee, a pirate hat he wore for 3 Halloweens in a row. I opened it and just stared. These weren't just artifacts. They were echoes, the kind that don't fade, just settle into the walls of a home long after the laughter's gone. There was a shoebox at the bottom. Inside, a letter, unfinished, my handwriting. Dear Josh, you were 11 today. You asked me if getting older always means feeling further away. I didn't know what to say. I wish I had told you. It ended there. No date, no signature. I must have written it after a hard day and never sent it. Or maybe I couldn't finish it because I didn't know how to say, yes, it does. Sometimes. I folded it back and set the box aside. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry, just tired of carrying things I never got to say. That night, I started writing a new letter, but not for the letters he'll never read folder. This one I intended to send. Dear Josh, I don't know if this letter is welcome, and I won't ask you to reply, but I wanted you to know I received the book, and I understood what it meant. You were right not to invite me. That sounds strange to write, but it's true. Not because I wouldn't have loved to be there, not because I don't care, but because, deep down, you must have known I hadn't yet learned how to witness your happiness without trying to shape it. That's something I'm working on. Not for your forgiveness, but for myself. I'm not perfect. You know that better than anyone. But I'm still learning, and if there's ever a day when you feel ready to talk, to visit, even just to send a postcard, I'll be here. No expectations, no explanations, just a door, open. With love, Mom. I printed the letter, folded it neatly, put it in an envelope with handwriting he would recognize. No perfume, no drama, just ink and honesty. The next morning, I mailed it. It felt like dropping a stone into a lake, not expecting ripples, but doing it anyway. Days passed, then a week. No word. But strangely, I felt lighter. I began noticing small things again. The way the afternoon light fell on the living room floor. The sound of birds returning after a long winter. The way I didn't flinch when I passed by a wedding store downtown. One afternoon, I walked to the market and saw a young couple in the produce aisle. They were laughing over tomatoes. He looked a little like Josh, same way of tilting his head when he was amused. I didn't feel a stab of grief, just a soft awareness that the world was still full of people learning how to love each other imperfectly. That night, I rearranged the living room. I took down a framed photo from Josh's high school graduation, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't want to keep freezing him in versions he had outgrown. I replaced it with a landscape he once painted, a mountain with crooked trees and a sky that bled from orange to violet. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, like him. The next morning, there was an envelope in the mailbox. No return address again. Inside, a postcard, a photo of a quiet lake. No message, just, "Mom, thank you. I'm thinking." That was all. And it was enough. 3 weeks passed after the postcard. I didn't send another letter. I didn't text, didn't call. It wasn't discipline. It was something closer to respect, a kind of quiet waiting I hadn't practiced before. One Sunday, while I was potting herbs on the back porch, my phone rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and checked the screen. It was him, Josh. The last time he called me, really called me, had been 2 birthdays ago. A rushed message, a half-finished "love you" at the end. I answered slowly, like I was picking up a memory. "Hi," I said. His voice was cautious, but soft. "Hey, is this a good time?" I almost laughed. I wanted to say, "Any time you call is a good time." But I didn't. Instead, I sat down and said, "Yeah, I'm here." There was a pause, the kind only estranged people know. Then he said, "I got your letter." I figured. Another pause, a breath, and then, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." "But I want to." I stayed quiet. Let him find the words. "I guess I didn't know how to include you," he said. My throat tightened. "I know. I wasn't trying to hurt you, but part of me thought it might be easier." "Easier than what?" "Than worrying about how you'd see her, or us, or me." I felt the wind shift slightly, lifting the scent of rosemary from the pot beside me. "You thought I'd judge you," I said. I didn't want to feel like I had to defend my choices. I closed my eyes. He was right. How many times had I offered advice that wasn't asked for? How many moments had I turned into lessons? "I'm sorry, Josh." He let the words settle. "I know you love me," he said. "But love, it always came with edits. Like you were holding a red pen ready to fix." I felt something deep inside me give way. Not collapse, but surrender. "I think I thought parenting meant protecting," I whispered, "even when protection felt like control." "Yes." We were quiet again, but this silence felt different. Not avoidance, but presence. "I love her," he said. "Sophia. She makes me feel like I'm allowed to be messy." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "She's really good at making tea," he added with a small laugh. I smiled. "Then I already like her." He hesitated. "She asked me last week if I'd ever invite you over." My heart jumped, but I kept my voice level. "And what did you say?" I said, "I don't know." "That's fair." He exhaled. "But I think I'm getting closer to yes. Take your time." That's what I told him. Even though every cell in me wanted to shout, "I'm ready. Come home. Let me meet her." But that wasn't my job anymore. My job was to stay steady, to be the place that didn't push. We talked a little longer about the weather, a new book he'd read, a show he and Sophia were watching. When he hung up, I didn't cry. Instead, I sat back and let the sun hit my face. It felt warm, earned. That evening, I baked. Not because I needed comfort, but because I had the urge to make something from scratch, something slow and fragrant and shared. I made his favorite, banana bread with dark chocolate chunks. I wrapped half and froze it, just in case. Later that week, I began cleaning the guest room, not because I expected him to visit, but because it felt like time to open space again, not just in the house, but in myself. I washed the sheets, opened the window, set a small plant on the sill. I found one of his old books under the bed, a sci-fi paperback with a broken spine. I placed it on the nightstand. Then I closed the door, gently, not locking it, not labeling it, just letting it wait. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not a postcard, not a text, an envelope, cream-colored, handwritten. I stared at it on the kitchen counter for half an hour before I opened it. The return address wasn't familiar, but the name was. Sophia. I unfolded the note carefully. The paper was thick, the handwriting graceful, like someone who still believed in slow things. Dear Marlene, it began. That's my name, though I hadn't heard it spoken softly in a long time. I hope this letter finds you gently. I wasn't sure if I should write. Josh didn't ask me to, but I wanted to, because I've heard about you, and I've read pieces of you, your cards, the way you sign off, your cooking notes he kept, and because I married your son, I felt it was right that I introduce myself to the woman who first taught him how to love, even if it was imperfect. Josh and I were learning each other. Some days it's easy. Some days we trip over the past, his, mine, yours. He doesn't speak badly of you, but I can tell he carries history in his silences, and I wanted you to know. I see the love beneath that. I see how hard it must have been, raising him with more weight than hands. I don't know what your story is, but I feel it. I stopped reading there, let the words breathe. Then I kept going. We had a small wedding because it felt safer. We didn't want eyes on us that might see through lenses of fear or comparison. And we didn't invite many people, not even his father. We just needed to start fresh. But fresh doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring what brought us here, even the brokenness. I hope someday you'll let me make you tea. Josh says you bake banana bread. I can't compete with that, but I make a mean lemon cake. With warmth, Sophia. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't a peace offering. It was something braver, an invitation without demand. I folded the letter, placed it in the kitchen drawer where I kept birthday candles and matches, and sat down. I didn't cry, but I felt like something inside me, something brittle, softened. That afternoon I baked another loaf, and for the first time in years, I added a sticky note on top. Best served with tea, lemon if possible. I didn't mail it, I just held it in my hands. Practicing, maybe. The next day, I replied, Dear Sophia, thank you. Not just for the letter, but for the grace between your words. You didn't have to write. You didn't have to be gentle. But you were. And that tells me something important about the woman my son married. I wasn't the mother I wanted to be. I tried, God, how I tried. But I often loved in the shape of worry. And worry can feel like judgment when you're on the receiving end. If Josh finds peace with you, even if I'm not always invited into that peace, I will find my own in knowing he is safe. Someday, I'd like to meet you. Until then, thank you for seeing me in the echoes. Sincerely, Marlene. I mailed it that afternoon. No expectations, just a bridge. That night, I lit a candle in the living room, one of those scented ones he used to roll his eyes at, lavender and something floral. I let it burn for hours, not to cover anything up, but to bless the quiet. A few Saturdays later, I was pruning the lavender by the front gate when I heard footsteps. I looked up, and there they were, Josh and Sophia. No warning, no call ahead, just there. He looked taller, maybe thinner. She was holding a small tote bag, her free hand looped loosely around his. They both looked nervous. "Hi, Mom," he said. And just like that, the world rearranged itself. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and walked slowly toward them. Not too fast, not too careful. Just enough to show I wasn't going to break the moment with old stories or expectations. "Hi," I said back. Sophia stepped forward. "Hi, Marlene. I hope this isn't a bad time." I shook my head. "It's a perfect time. You caught the lavender before I butchered it." She smiled. Josh looked relieved. I stepped aside and opened the gate. "Come in." Inside, the house suddenly felt too small and too big at the same time. The kind of stretch you feel when trying to make space for something you hope won't leave too quickly. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once braided his hair before picture day in second grade. The banana bread was already wrapped in the fridge. I sliced it quietly. "Tea?" I asked. "Yes, please," Sophia said. Josh nodded. "Same." I boiled the water, my back to them, trying not to hover. Sophia broke the silence first. "I really liked your letter." "Thank you," I said. "It made me cry." I turned. "I'm glad it found you." Josh cleared his throat. "I brought something." He reached into his bag and pulled out a framed photograph. It was their wedding picture. Simple, intimate. Just the two of them standing under a tree in dusk light. His arm around her waist, her hand over his heart. "We wanted you to have this," he said. I took it gently. The glass was cool under my fingers. "You both look—" I struggled for a word that wouldn't feel like a mother's claim or a stranger's praise. "Like yourselves," I finally said. Sophia smiled. That was the goal. I set the photo on the windowsill. Let it catch the late morning sun. Josh looked around the room like he was trying to find what had changed, or what hadn't. "This place still smells like cardamom," he said. I laughed. "Some things stick." We drank tea, ate quietly, let the silence between bites do the heavy lifting. Sophia told me about her work. She was teaching a local writing class. Josh mentioned he was thinking about grad school. We didn't talk about the past. Not directly. But when Josh helped me rinse the mugs and said, "Thanks for letting us drop by," I replied, "Thanks for walking in." As they were leaving, Sophia turned to me and said, "I'd like to come again. Maybe just me sometime." I nodded. "I'd like that." Josh looked at me, not searching, not guarded, just seeing. And I saw him too. Not the boy I raised, not the man who shut the door, but the human being who had finally found a way to knock again. As they walked down the path, I stood at the door a moment longer. The lavender moved softly in the breeze. I didn't cry, but I did press my hand to my chest, right where his hand had been, 17 years ago, when he first learned how to say "Mama." The memory didn't hurt anymore. It just bloomed. Sophia came by the following Thursday. She texted first, just a simple, "If you're free this week, I'd love to come by." Just me. I stood looking at that message for 5 minutes. Then I wrote back, "Thursday, I'll have the kettle on." When she arrived, she was holding a pie. "Peach and thyme," she said, "my mother's recipe." I thought, well, I thought we could trade stories over it. There was something unpolished about her that I liked. Not messy, just real. We sat at the table, and the house felt different than it had even just a week earlier, like it had exhaled. I served tea, the same lemon blend she mentioned in her letter. She noticed. "Thank you," she said. "That's thoughtful." We talked. Not about Josh, not at first. We talked about food and plants, and how spring always feels like a second chance, even if you haven't done anything to earn it. Then the stories came. "I lost my mom when I was 23, Sophia said. "Breast cancer. Fast." I nodded slowly. "That's so young." "She was everything. I think that's why I hold so tightly now. To love, to people." She looked at me. "I think Josh does the opposite. He lets go too fast." I sipped my tea. "I taught him that," I said, not as a confession, but a truth. "I don't think he resents you," she added softly. "I think he just doesn't know how to come close without feeling like he'll disappoint someone." I looked out the window, past the rosemary bush, to the garden that never quite grew straight. "I used to think parenting meant molding," I said. "Now I think it's more like tending. You don't force a plant to grow a certain way. You just give it light, water, room." She smiled. "I think you're tending now." I served the pie. It was sweet, with a surprising little bite, the time cutting through like a memory you didn't expect to revisit. "I like it," I said. "It lingers." She laughed. "I think I do that too." We were quiet for a while after that. Then she stood. "I brought something," she said, reaching into her bag. It was a small photo album, linen covered, about the size of a paperback. She placed it in front of me. "It's our wedding. The whole day. Josh doesn't love posting things online, but we printed these for close family." I touched the cover. "I'm not sure I qualify as that anymore." She shook her head. "You do. You always will." I opened the album, and there it was. The walk through the woods, the tree with ribbons, the laughter, the quiet vows. It was intimate, tender, full. I flipped each page slowly, letting myself feel every moment I hadn't been part of. And yet, sitting there beside her, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a gift. When I closed the album, I looked at her. "Thank you for letting me see." She reached over and touched my hand. "Thank you for being willing to." After she left, I didn't put the album on a shelf. I set it on the coffee table, right in the open. Not as a trophy, not as proof, but as a reminder. That love doesn't always arrive on time. But sometimes, if we let it, it still arrives. It was a month later when Josh came back, this time alone. No text, no warning. I was in the backyard, repotting succulents, when I saw him walking up the gravel path with that same uncertain confidence he had as a child whenever he knew he'd done something brave. "Hi," he said, hands in his pockets. I dusted off my gloves and stood. "You're getting good at showing up." He smiled. "I'm trying." I motioned to the bench beneath the old maple tree. "Sit with me." We sat there for a while in the shade, just listening to the wind rattle the leaves. Finally, he said, "She told me about your talk." I nodded. "She really likes you." "I like her too," I said. "I think I would have liked her, even if she hadn't liked me. But it helps." He let out a breath. "I'm glad." There was a pause. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. "I found this last week," he said. It was stuck in a box of my college stuff. He handed it to me. It was my handwriting. Faded, but still mine. The unfinished letter. the one I'd written when he turned 11. I opened it. I'd forgotten how short it was, how incomplete. "I remember when you wrote that," he said. I looked at him, surprised. "You read it?" "Years ago, before college. I wasn't supposed to see it. It must have gotten mixed into my things. But I read it, and I kept it." He paused. "I think I didn't understand it then, but now I do." I folded it gently and held it in my lap. "I wish I'd finished it," I said. He looked at me. "You still can." That hit me harder than I expected. We sat in the quiet again. Then I asked, "What changed?" He thought for a long moment. "You did," he said simply. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't want to cloud that clarity with too much. "I used to think healing meant going back," he continued. "Now I think it means moving forward with a better map." He turned to me. "I don't want to go backward, Mom, but I want to move forward, with you in it." I felt something deep inside unclench, like an old fist finally opening. "Then let's go forward," I said. We stayed on that bench for a long time, not talking. The breeze picked up, and he closed his eyes like he was memorizing the sound. Before he left, he turned back at the gate. "Oh, Sophia's birthday is next month. We're having a dinner. Just a few people. No pressure, but I'd love to come," I said, before he could finish. He grinned. "We'll text." And then he was gone. That night, I opened the document on my computer, the one titled "Letters He'll Never Read," and I changed the name. "Letters We're Still Writing." Then I added a new page. "Dear Josh, today you sat beside me in the shade of the tree where you used to chase squirrels and ask impossible questions. You told me we're moving forward. I believe you, and I'm coming too." The night of Sophia's birthday dinner arrived with a kind of quiet ceremony. I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, not out of vanity, but out of reverence. "What do you wear when you are meeting the future?" I chose a soft blue blouse, the one Josh once said brought out my eyes, and black slacks that had seen weddings, funerals, and everything in between. I brought the banana bread and a card, handwritten, no envelope. It said, "Thank you for loving my son well." When I arrived, the house was glowing. It wasn't large, a craftsman with ivy on the railings and a porch that creaked like it had stories of its own. Sophia opened the door. She was barefoot and radiant. "You made it," she whispered, like she wasn't quite sure if this was a dream. I wouldn't have missed it. Inside, there were maybe 10 people, a few friends, 2 colleagues, someone's cousin, all strangers, but not unfriendly. Josh greeted me with a smile that felt like light, finding its way through leaves. "Hey, Mom." I don't know why, but I reached up and touched his cheek like I used to when he had chicken pox and needed to be reminded he wasn't gross or unlovable. He didn't flinch. Sophia took the banana bread with a kind of ceremonial reverence. "We're saving this for last," she said. "The real cake." Dinner was simple. Roasted vegetables, baked fish, a salad with toasted almonds. We ate outside under string lights. At one point, Josh stood to toast her. He didn't say much, but what he said stilled the air. "She made me softer," he said, glass in hand, "and helped me forgive where I came from." He didn't look at me when he said it, but he didn't have to. I felt it land, like a warm coat over old scars. Later, after cake, after laughter, After the last guest had gone, Sophia and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. She was washing dishes. I dried. We moved like people who had once choreographed a dance in a dream. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for showing up. Thank you for inviting me." She turned and handed me a damp plate. "I hope this is the beginning of something." It already is. We hugged. Not stiff, not too long, just enough. Josh appeared behind me, leaning against the doorframe. "You two okay in here?" Sophia grinned. "We're plotting against you." "Figures." I grabbed my coat. "I should go." He walked me to the porch. The air was cool, the kind that makes you believe seasons really do change things. "I'm proud of you," I said. He looked startled. "For what?" "For trying." He looked down. "I'm still learning." "So am I." We stood there a moment longer, and then, for the first time in years, he stepped forward and hugged me. Not out of guilt, not out of habit, but out of choice. When I got home, I didn't go straight to bed. I lit a candle, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a fresh page in the notebook I now kept beside the stove. I wrote, "Dear Josh, tonight I saw your joy with my own eyes. It didn't need my approval, and that's what made it beautiful. Thank you for letting me witness it. I'll keep showing up. Love, Mom." I tore out the page, folded it, and slid it into a drawer. Not to be mailed, just to be held, because some letters are meant to be lived, not sent.